doctorate in education and developmental psychology, and is currently teaching in middle schoolers some psychology and statistics at Center for Learning, an alternative school outside of Bangalore. So her exploration in children's development and learning in education are presented in a book, What Did You Ask at School? And other research articles. So before I hand it over to Dr. Kamla, I ask all the participants to stay on mute at all the times. You can ask the questions and answer after the talk ends. And yes, I will hand it over to Dr. Kamla. We can now proceed with our talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nidhi, and thanks to the audience members, some very kind comments. I'll share screen and start. Just let me know if it's visible.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, still okay? Okay.
Yes,
So this topic is actually taken from my second book. I'll tell you a little bit about the book later, but it's one of my favorite topics. And it's something that you might all have heard about. You've heard of learning styles, right? Everyone has heard of this. As a teacher, see, all of you as students of education, you might have read it in books or you might have heard it in classes, I don't know. But for me, as a school teacher, I encounter it in parents and in fellow teachers. Oftentimes, a parent will come and say, I think my child learns better this way, or I think my child has a different way of learning than the usual or than the mainstream and so on. And this really intrigued me and made me want to find out more about this. And is there, as Nidhi said, I have a psychology training, and that's what I'm really interested in, which is to find out, is there a psychological, scientific evidence basis for things that we say in education? And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't, right? So this particular question is one where I'm giving away the plot of the story. The story is that there really isn't any such thing. There is no good basis, scientific basis for learning styles. So I'll start with, of course, the title sounds like there is. Every child learns differently. The basic question is this: do all children process information in essentially the same way? Okay. So let me give you a very simple diagram of information processing in any human brain. Okay, this is how we process information. I don't know, some of you may have seen this kind of picture before. By the way, I was sharing with Ruth that I'm happy with your responding in chat if I ask a question, and I may not be able to respond to every chat response, but I would like to see. I like seeing responses. Okay, so this basic model works like this. All these arrows on the left, can you see my cursor?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So all these arrows on the left are stimuli from the outside world. Things that are coming in, hitting us through our eyes, our ears, and so on. And out of all this, we pay attention to a very small fraction of things, right? And the things that we pay attention to travel into something that's been called the working memory storage. It's something like a desk. It's a limited size, limited capacity space, and it consists of all the things that I'm thinking about just now. Okay, like for you, your working memory has a bit of my voice in it, and it also has maybe some memories. Maybe I'm evoking some memories of your last psychology course, or maybe you're thinking about, maybe you're hungry and you're thinking about food. I don't know. Whatever you're thinking of will be in this space right now. So what I'm paying attention to is here. And interestingly, there's something else that's here. It's something that comes from long-term memory and is retrieved. So this arrow is a process called retrieval. So I'm pulling stuff from my long-term memories and again paying attention to it right now in the moment. Okay. And of course, whatever I'm attending to in the moment, some of it in some form will be stored back in long-term memory, right? And that's called encoding. I think most of you might be familiar with this basic diagram, okay? And the question is, if this is the way, this is the picture of learning, by the way, right? I experience something, I process it, I relate it to what I know already, that's this retrieval, and then I store something new. That's learning, essentially. So the question is, do children have different ways of doing this? Are there different ways, or do we all pretty much do this? That's one way we can ask the question about learning styles. So let's put it this way. What could differ from one learner to another? Okay. And I'll go through 4 things that can differ. And each time I'll refer back to that same picture. Okay. So the first thing that can differ is the relative efficiency of each process. Yeah. Which are the processes here? Can you want to chat me which are the processes? The processes are the ones with arrows, right? So those would be, yeah, that's right. Attention would be one, encoding is the other, and retrieval is the other. And children can differ from each other in terms of how efficiently they do these things. Yeah, we all know now that there are children who have difficulty with regulating attention, either too much or too little. This function is not very efficient. Right? There are also children who have difficulty encoding and remembering and bringing back old memories. So there are differences. Another thing that can differ is the capacity of working memory. And there's been a lot of research on this, saying that some people can just keep more in mind at the same time. And that can have quite striking consequences because, if you can keep a lot in your mind at the same time, there's more opportunity for making connections that will lead to better learning. Yeah? Making connections between, as we said earlier, what's coming in and what's coming from memory. So yeah, that also could differ. Then, of course, there could be differences in how much people know, right? Some people know a little, some people know a lot. We've all met children who seem to be like little encyclopedias. They know a whole lot. And others who haven't yet learned much, they know only little, they have their own ideas. Okay, so that's another source of difference. And lastly, interconnections of stored knowledge with each other. The quality, I would call it the quality of that knowledge. In long-term memory, some children may have a lot of disconnected facts, just pieces of information. And for other lucky ones who had good teachers who've taught them to understand and to connect different pieces of information, they'll have a highly networked long-term memory. And this also can make a huge difference to the quality of a learner. Okay. So, all right, we've said there is this processing model. There are ways in which learners could differ from one another. This is all fine. But do these differences express as learning styles? And if you've heard the phrase before, I'm sure you're shaking your head. Because this is not what is usually meant by learning styles. Yeah. Differences that I've just talked about, they do express as variations in ease of learning. Some people can learn faster, better, quicker, they get it, yeah. For others, it takes a little longer. In a minority of learners, it might express as actual learning difficulties or attentional difficulties. But this is a whole range of learners. But none of this is styles, right? So I'm going to give you an analogy to, to understand what could learning styles refer to. Can you guess what I'm going to take as analogy? What process? Yes, exactly, how we digest. Okay. So let's ask ourselves a similar question as learning. Do we all digest food in essentially the same way? I don't have a nice diagram of the digestive system, but we all remember it from high school. Don't we all do it the same way? In this roughly the same order, with roughly the same chemicals acting on the, the stomach juices are the same and so on and so forth. Initially, you might say yes, but let's think a little deeper. There are people with difficulties in digestion, no? Like you may have a strong allergy to peanuts. It can be pretty serious. You cannot eat peanuts. Some people have intolerances like, gluten, you must have heard, or dairy. So some people can't have milk products. So there are differences, difficulties with digestion. And then there's something called preferences, which all of us experience. I like this, I don't like that, I prefer not to eat this, I hate that, I love that. Okay. And I think this is where we will find a clue to our learning styles, perhaps. So learners can also have difficulties, as we saw earlier. You can think of these as, like difficulties with digestion. But do learners have preferences? So what do you think? If I could hear a few responses from you on, do learners have preferences? They do. Arushi says they do. Okay, you all feel that. We've heard of audio visual. Yeah, okay. So the feeling is that we do have preferences. Then the next question, which is very important, because you see, I don't know about you, but when a child in my school says, I don't like this, I like that, I don't take it very seriously. I think, I don't know if some of you are mothers and fathers, maybe you take your child's preferences, food preferences very seriously, but at school where we serve food, we don't. If somebody says, I don't like this, we say, it's okay, eat a little bit, nothing will happen to you. And we assume that these preferences are, tastes born of experience, right? And we don't feel that if someone has a preference, we have to cater to it, if you know what I mean. So this is the question we're going to ask about learning preferences. Yeah? What is the basis? What's the origin of a stated preference, whether it's for a food or a learning mood? Is there anyone here, a parent, who's quite strict, who's not, indulgent about their child's food preferences? I'm just curious. Oh, okay, there's no one with children here. Very young, all of you, sorry. You have. So, Ramakrishna, are you indulgent of your children's preferences?
More than me, my wife does it, ma'am.
Okay.
I think I'm indulgent because she's from the north and I'm from the south.
Okay.
So I'm sort of made to think that leafy vegetables are good.
Yes.
And that's not the truth, or rather that's not available.
Okay, so this is a perfect example, right? You understand that there's nothing innate about this preference. You said it. You've said she's from the north, I'm from the south, which clearly means that it's based on our experiences in childhood and so on, right? That's a very nice example. Thanks for that, because now we can go on to learning styles and ask ourselves, learning preferences or preferences for certain learning modes, to what extent are they innate all the way to environmentally induced? By innate, you know what I mean, right? Innate meaning it's something wired into us right from birth. So let's imagine a spectrum. So here's a spectrum. At this end is somebody whose learning style is genetically determined, like literally determined at birth. And some people were mentioning audio, visual learning, audio, kinesthetic. Okay, maybe all these things are preferences that are genetically determined. That's at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum is something I'm calling reinforced through experience. So there's some little sign of something in childhood, and it often could be actually an ability, maybe a very strong physical ability, like some sports ability or some athletic ability, that gets converted to a learning preference just through reinforcement. through the adults and the child choosing experiences of one kind only. This, okay, I hope it's clear, the two things, the two ends of the spectrum. Arushi, lost me sound-wise or lost my meaning? Oh, sound-wise. Okay, now I'm back, right? All right. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is where on this, and you know, I've drawn, my friend has done these diagrams, drawings for my book. She made them both sad faces because she said to be fixed at either end feels very sad. Okay, so let's look at. The thing is that there's no theoretical evidence to answer this very interesting question. Perhaps because, even more fundamentally, there is no theoretical evidence to support the notion of learning styles. That is actually the big hole in the middle around which we're trying to build something. It's actually a hole. There is no strong theoretical evidence. And then on top of that, we're asking the question, well, is it genetic? Is it, you know, and environmental? We don't know because we still don't have any idea what these learning styles are. Okay. All right, I'll go on. Oh yeah, I wanted to share this nice paper, the abstract of this paper. One second. Sorry. I need to escape. Yeah, just give me a minute. I want to share it. Yeah, can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is quite a recent paper, just 2020.
We are still seeing the
called,
presentation.
Not able to see it yet?
Oh, we are not seeing the paper. We are seeing only the presentation.
Oh, okay, wait. I think that's because I didn't share my whole screen. Okay, now I'll share the. Thanks for telling me. I never know what. Now, is it working now?
Yes.
So I'll just read the title and the abstract. It's very interesting because you'll understand what we're talking about. The title says, maybe we are born with it, or maybe it's experience, toward a deeper understanding of the learning style myth. 3 authors from the University of Michigan. Decades of research suggests that learning styles, or the belief that people learn better when they receive instruction in their dominant way of learning, may be one of the most pervasive myths about cognition. Nonetheless, little is known about what it means to believe in learning styles. The present investigation uses one theoretical framework, psychological essentialism, to explore the content and consistency of people's learning style beliefs. So they're not talking about learning style. They're talking about people believing in learning styles, and they're studying that. It's very interesting. Psychological essentialism is a belief that certain categories such as dogs, girls, or visual learners have an underlying reality or true nature that is biologically based and highly predictive of many other features. Just to explain this briefly, obviously dogs are dogs. There's an underlying reality to that. There's a true doggy nature to a dog. It is biologically a dog. In the same way, do visual learners have such an essential reality? Are they really visual learners in a biological sense? Yeah, that's the question. We tested the prevalence of erroneous essentialist beliefs regarding learning styles in both educators and non-educators, including the belief that learning styles are innate, unchanging, discrete, and wired into the brain. In each of 2 experiments, we identified 2 groups of learning style believers. One group holding an essentialist interpretation of learning styles, and the other group holding a non-essentialist interpretation. No differences were found between educators and non-educators' beliefs. And in fact, there was only one factor found to be significant predictor: the age of the population with whom they work. Guess what? Those who work with younger children were more likely to interpret learning styles in an essentialist way. Okay? And the paper goes on. It's very, very interesting. I can send the link out to you guys, or you can just take a screenshot. What they find is that primary school teachers hold these essentialist beliefs of learning styles much more so than at later ages. And there's some good reasons for that, which you can see later. Okay, stop sharing this. Go back. Yeah. So now I'm going to explain to you what it takes for a learning styles theory to work, in the sense for it to be acceptable as a theory. It has to fulfill 3 criteria. See, why I'm saying this is, it's easy for you and me to come up with a learning style theory, actually. We can look around at our friends, we can look at ourselves, we can look at the children in our family, and we can do it and we can say, oh yeah, I noticed some people like to study in quiet places, some people like to study in noisy places, they like to study with others, some like to study alone. I can come up with any number of theories, yeah? But for it to be more than just my own, myth making, it has to fulfill some criteria. One, there has to be convergence of theorizing and research. Yeah, that means something that I theorize, at least some of my other colleagues should come to the same conclusion. Okay, it can't be just me and my little lab of researchers. There has to be, the field as a whole has to come slowly together to one common picture. I'll be talking more about this convergence later, because it's a very interesting concept in psychology, especially. It's very unlike other sciences, right? Unlike physics, chemistry. Second criterion that it has to fulfill is the measures of this learning style have to be reliable and valid. So if I have a theory of learning styles, I have to have a way of measuring, no? I have to have a scale or a measure that can be used for anyone to say, this is my learning style theory and this is your style. This is your style. This is your style, and so on. These measures have to be reliable and valid. And I'll explain that also a little later. And the third criterion that you need for it to work is some evidence that when you match a style to a mode, the learning improves. If I don't have that evidence, it's pointless, right? The whole point of a learning style theory is that I will tell you in which mode this student will learn best. Which means if I match the style to a mode, I should see better learning. That seems to me reasonable, okay? So now we will look at how learning styles theories do in all these 3 areas. Okay, first piece of bad news is that theories of learning styles have not converged over time. Each researcher seems to come up with some categorization it can be very appealing. It can be very exciting, very beautiful ideas. But, sometimes they map onto each other, like mine and yours and some other researchers may come together, but most often not. And some examples, if I show you, you'll see what I mean. Look at these. I'm not giving you the names of these theories, but this is how they classify. There are 2 kinds of learners, those who see things as a whole and those who see the details. Okay, that's one theory. Then here's another. There are 2 kinds of learners, those who think in images, those who think in words. Okay, fine. Then here's another theory. There are 4 kinds of learners, those preferring information in graphics or spoken information or written or concrete examples. That's another theory. Then there are 2 kinds of learners, those who prefer a concrete approach, those who prefer abstraction. That's another theory. And these I'm picking, by the way, these are not my friends' theories. These are established, published theories. So these are proper scientific articles with some following. Each of these theories has a good following. There are 4 kinds of learners: rational theorists, safekeeping organizers, experimental innovators, and feeling humanitarians. And there are 2, this is my favorite, 2 kinds of learners, the left brain people and the right brain people. So my point is, each of these, as I said, has a following. And this is a This is a following both in science, like among scientists, and also among educators. But so that you might say, okay, that's fine. There are people who believe that. The problem is these are not coming together. Convergence is very necessary, even in a subject like psychology. Why do I say even in psychology? Can anybody say why I'm saying even in psychology? We've all studied psychology now. So, okay, it's different for different people. Yeah, but as a field, psychology is talking about human beings in general. They're not talking about each of us, in a sense. So why am I saying lack of convergence is a problem? It is a problem, but I'm saying even in psychology, the reason I'm saying that is, yeah, perspective, yeah, social science, exactly. People seem to feel that, oh, psychology is full of different theories, and they're all very nice, but in the end, I don't know what is true. Haven't you heard this or felt this before? You must have. What I'm trying to say is that when you study psychology a little bit, and it's such a beautiful subject, you will see that convergence happens on many questions, even the questions that are quite difficult, that seem initially to start very divergent. Over the decades, you'll see convergence. Like if you look at motivation, when it started in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, there were many theories of motivation. But today, if you see the field as a whole, it has one model of motivation. Psychology has one dominant model. And even information processing, there is one dominant model of information processing. This is convergence. And since it hasn't happened in the case of learning styles, right, it's a sign that we may be researching a myth, because it's gone on for very long. At least 50, 60 years, learning styles have been studied. And it still hasn't happened. So this is a problem. Okay, now to go back to, so we said the 3 criteria. First one we're done for now. Second one is reliable and valid measures. Okay. How do we measure learning styles? Any idea how you would measure one? What would you use? What kind of measure would you use? Yes, self-report questionnaires. Yeah, it's a written form. Exactly. This is the simplest thing, right? There's no way. I mean, maybe I could get to know you very well and watch you and observe you over months and then decide, okay, this is how you learn best. But actually, learning style measures are all questionnaires, self-report. Now, a questionnaire has to have it has to be of good quality. It's not just a bunch of questions put together and, printed out. They have to be reliable. Reliable means consistently classifying learners over time. So if today I fill out one questionnaire and I turn out to be, a details learner, okay, or a visual learner, and then after 2 weeks after a month, if I take another similar test, I should be classified as visual again. It has to be reliable. And interestingly, this is not the case for many learning styles measures. They don't have high reliability over time. And remember I said that a learning style typically should be something stable, right? It's not like my mood. You know the difference between a mood and a learning style. You think of the former as something that fluctuates. Morning, I'm feeling cheerful. Afternoon, I'm feeling dull. Night, I'm really bugged. And that's normal for moods, right? But for learning styles, no, then it's pointless. As a construct, it's pointless if it changes. It should be stable. Therefore, the measures have to give consistent results. And this is a problem. Secondly, they have to be valid. That is, it has to correlate with something in real life for it to be true. In the sense, it has to be real. And this is a harder thing to test and I'll show you some. We'll talk about it in a minute. Here are some well-known examples of tests. Rita Dunn's Learning Styles Inventory, Richard Riding's the CSA, that's quite well known, Anthony Gregor's Mind Styles Delineator, Robert Sternberg's Thinking Styles, Ned Herman's Brain Dominance Instrument. Okay. All these, by the way, none of these are free. That I will talk about later. They all cost. You have to buy the test. You have to pay to do it. They're all self-report tests. They are asking, all of them, what are they actually asking? They're asking, the learner, are you aware of what your preference is? Preferred learning style. For example, do you prefer reading to listening and so on? Okay, that's how they look. I'm going to show you one soon, and then you'll see an example. The reliability is not high, as I said earlier. Okay, now I think we need to make a small digression that's very important. It's time to make this point here. These self-report tests are not asking if the learner is a good reader. Okay, so here's the difference. Do you prefer reading to listening when you're learning? That's one question. Not, are you a good reader? Are you good at reading? Okay, this is actually quite a subtle difference. And when you are answering these self-reports, it's easy to flip over to the ability question in your mind and start answering that way. But that is not what it's asking, right? Are learning styles the same thing as abilities? What do you think? Can I hear some, can I see some chat? No, they shouldn't be. It's not for you, right? When you think about a learning style, it's not an ability. For anyone, it is an ability. Like a strength, weakness kind of thing. I have. Okay. So just think about it. Learning style could be based on ability. All right, let's it's a preference. It can be. Okay, nice. Ability is a skill and your style. Yeah, but now let's be careful. Yeah, I know. I feel for you. I know you're holding on to your idea of learning styles. Let me go on. See, if learning styles are just another name for abilities or strengths, then why invent a new term and create a separate body of research on it, right? You would agree. So they have to be different. They have to be distinguishable from abilities. Learning styles are only interesting if they represent alternative ways of mastering any kind of content. Otherwise, they are not interesting. They have no educational value. Would you agree? I think you would agree with this, right? These are not varying abilities to read or listen or write or dance or jump. These are ways of mastering, and it has to be ways of mastering any kind of content. This is important, okay? Because when somebody comes to me and says, my child she's a visual learner, okay? What they mean is, they don't mean, so she cannot learn XYZ, she can only learn ABC. They mean she will learn anything but visually. That is what they mean when they say that. And I think if you look at yourself and your understanding of learning styles till now, it is that. Okay. Yes. All right. Let's go on. Yeah, they must represent alternative paths to a common goal. Goal is learning. Goal is understanding. I do it through reading. You do it through listening. Someone else does it through jumping. It doesn't matter. It should all lead to learning. That's what ideally, that's the meaning of a learning style. Okay. So now we go back. Sorry, that was a little digression to make sure that you know the difference between the two. We look at our third criterion. Is there evidence that when you match a style to a mode, learning improves? And really, this is the test. This is a test of validity. I would say this is a good test of validity. And let's look now at, it's called the matching hypothesis. I'll go through it step by step. Very simple design. You take a bunch of participants, learners, you test them on your test, and divide them into groups according to learning style. So you can have your visual and your audio and all that. Then choose one topic that will be taught to everyone, but half the participants will be given an instruction mode that matches their learning style and half will not. Because you want to see if matching improves learning. That makes sense. And at the end of this teaching, you'll test everyone on their understanding of the topic. And if the matched groups always outperform the mismatched groups, then you have evidence for the matching hypothesis. Is this clear? I'll just keep it on screen for a minute. Yes, Ramya. Okay, thank you. I have actually a picture, a diagram that shows the same thing. This is the study, the basic study for all learning styles validity check. Here are your learners. They are divided into 2 styles or 4 styles or whatever number of styles. And then you use the mode that matches or the mode that doesn't match. And here the mode that doesn't match and the mode that matches. And if the smiley faces represent better learning, if you find better learning in these 2 smiley face categories, that means you possibly have a valid learning styles test and a valid theory. Yeah, because you've shown that you can divide people in such a way that when you match teaching to the style, it really works. Okay, now here's what happens to such studies. I'll tell you the bad news. Matching hypothesis studies have not revealed that it works. The matching hypothesis has failed, basically. And this is not only for one theory, it's for all the theories. Okay, so research does not support this picture. In fact, what people find is that some styles perform better than others regardless of mode. And some modes work better than others regardless of style, depending on which theory it is and on the content being learned. Yeah, I hope that's clear, right? So if you look here, it actually turns out that both these groups outperform both these groups. So for some reason, your classification might have been an ability classification rather than a style classification, okay? And the other thing we find is that one mode outperforms the other. So those taught in mode X just do better than those taught in mode Y. Maybe because you're using pictures in mode X and it's more suited to the topic, okay? So think about these things. We're going to look at it again later. So this is an example of a typical study. Beth Rogoski and her colleagues investigated the matching hypothesis with visual versus auditory styles, assuming some people prefer to learn through listening and others prefer to learn through reading. She used the online learning styles assessment inventory by Rita Dunn because it claims to measure these 2 styles. So Rogoski administered this test to 121 adults, and she found that 53 could not be classified either way as readers or listeners. That's to me already a problem, because what do you do with the unclassifiables? Then she took the remaining, there were 31 visual and 37 auditory. They were given material to learn. Some of them matched to their preferred style and some to the opposite style. This is exactly like the diagram I showed you. And they were all tested on the material learned. And what happened? The matched adults did no better than the mismatched adults. Rather, both the style groups did better on listening than reading comprehension. And the readers did better than the listeners overall with either mode. So this is an example of what I was telling you earlier. This happens again and again and again in matching hypothesis studies. So it doesn't leave us with much confidence about the validity of learning style theories. Okay. Again, a little bit of a digression because this can be a confusion. Here it says the readers did better than listeners. This should not be confused with the genuine difficulty that people with reading disabilities face in reading text. Such people will certainly learn better by listening than by reading. But in this case, it's not a question of style or preference. It is, if you think back, we were talking about difficulty, ability, something like maybe a mild intolerance in digestion. It is some difficulty in reading, which can be compensated for by listening instead of reading, and the same learning can happen. Okay, so this confusion again pointing out. So at this point, I'm running out of time. I have just a little more time. So you might think, if you ever stood in front of a class and taught, of course, there are differences between learners. Nobody's saying they're all the same. Please, no, me last of all. I don't say my learners are the same. But the differences are in interesting and real things. They come to us with different kinds of amounts of background knowledge, different interests, different abilities, talents. These differences, our teachers must be sensitive to these. And we must relate with each child as an individual being. First of all, that's like first and foremost. They are each individual beings, and they need a relationship that is individual. Okay, and there are these very valid differences that we must incorporate. Right? However large the class size, there are ways to acknowledge that children have different interests, different talents, different backgrounds. The only thing that I would say there's no need to worry about is different learning styles. This is not a real thing. There's a very good writer and psychologist called Dan Willingham. I just included a quote of his. You don't have to believe in learning styles theories to appreciate differences among kids and to hold an egalitarian attitude in the midst of such differences and to try to foster such attitudes in students. Yeah, we need egalitarian attitudes. We need recognition of differences and diversity. But can we not waste time looking for differences somewhere it doesn't exist? Right? Learning styles are. So can I just ask Ruth? I had an example of the VARK. Not necessary that we go through it. What do you say?
No, I think we can proceed.
Wait, sorry. Shall I just mute? I think, yeah. Anu, yeah, Ruth, what do you say?
I think we can proceed, ma'am.
Proceed quickly. I'll try and finish this bit.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, VARK, which you might have heard of, visual, auditory, reading, kinesthetic. It's invented by Neil Fleming. These are the four categories. The fifth one is multimodal. Visual, so wait, sorry, one sec. I'm just gonna share with you. This is one test that's free online, by the way, 16 questions free online, and be fun. You can also do it yourself. Are you seeing it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to learn how to take better photos. I would use diagrams showing the camera and what each part does. Ask questions and talk about the camera and its features. Use examples of good and poor photos showing how to improve them. Use written instructions about what to do. Each of you just think about this and think where you would put yourself. It says, please click more than one if a single answer doesn't match. So that's how you end up being multimodal. See, what strikes me when I look at this is, yes, I can choose a preference. For me, it is ask questions and talk about the camera. Okay. Now, I don't think it has to do with some innate essential learning style in my brain. I am also able to read diagrams. I'm also able to look at good and poor photographs and I can do all these things. But my preference is, I think, something that many people will, anybody who likes to learn from somebody else, right? Who likes social interactions. It's not my learning style. I don't know, each of you should do this and then see how you feel at the end of this. think about it with that skeptical attitude based on what I've been saying. See, I have a problem with my heart. I would prefer that the doctor used a plastic model to show me what was wrong, showed me a diagram of what was wrong, gave me something to read to explain what was wrong, described what was. Actually, I would like the doctor to do all of these. So sometimes these self-report divisions, seeking preferences that are not necessarily real, they have an issue. Okay, so I'll stop sharing this. You can check this out. I can send this link also to Ruth later. And we go on. Yeah. These are the 4 categories just described. And Neil Fleming himself, in that VARC website, he cautions against using this test as a diagnosis. And he says it should increase awareness, okay, of our preferences, which might have developed over time due to other reasons, right? Not to do with learning style, but other reasons. And also to increase awareness of various possible modes of learning. If a doctor were to see those 4 options, they might say, hey, oh yeah, I could do this also to teach my patients what's happening to them. It gives you more options. As teachers, that's how we should use this whole body of research. Rather than fixing students through assessments, as being of you are this type, you are that type, we should offer instruction in many modes, and we should encourage students to learn in these different modes. I feel as a teacher, I would want my students to know how to learn from a model and from a diagram and from text. You know what I mean? I think each mode of learning will give them something new and something nice. And they should be able to learn in any mode. You can't go out into the world and say, oh, this is a train timetable. I'm not able to understand. I want it in a different mode. Not possible. We need to teach our children to read and listen and look at diagrams and tables and figure things out with their hands. All these should be there for all our students. And one of the risks of fixing students as being of one or another type is we'll keep reinforcing that type. We will avoid using other modes and we'll just go to one mode. This is one of the biggest risks of learning style theory. Yeah, just more of the same, just to continue. You can read this on your own. I've taken some of these from my chapters. There are certain subjects which should be taught using certain modes. It makes sense. You should use diagrams in biology. You should use pictures and videos in geography. And there are certain age groups where you do need to use concrete materials for all subjects. Everything that you're teaching, they need concrete materials, right? That's the way to look at these modes, not as belonging to particular children, okay? One last point, which this another very good researcher and psychologist, a critique of learning styles theories, Frank Cauffield, he says, what is holding back scientific convergence? Why isn't it happening for learning styles theories? And he says, and this is really true, fortunes are being made as instruments, manuals, videotapes, in-service packages, overhead transparencies, publications, and workshops are all commercially advertised and promoted vigorously by some of the leading figures in the field. In short, the financial incentives are more likely to encourage further proliferation than sensible integration. What he means here is there is so much financial incentive in having your own theory and selling it, and there are always buyers. There are always educators and parents who are like, oh, I'm very interested in that theory of learning styles. I'll spend money and I'll invest in it and I'll use it. And because of these financial incentives for researchers, they're not going to be interested in questioning their own theories and saying, maybe it's not so true. Let me look at someone else's theory. Let me try and see how it coincides. No, it's becoming like a free market. And this is happening in India too. It has been happening for some years. And that's why it's an important myth to point out as a myth. I wanted to say one thing, Ruth, to end. You all mentioned my book. So this is the book you're talking about. But this second book that I wrote, published just 2 years ago, this is the one from which I got this topic is a chapter from this book. It's called Book 2. It has a little sticker that says Book 2, but I don't have it. They gave the same name to both. So this is Book 1 that you were talking about, but this topic is not there. The topic is in this Book 2. Okay, I'm done. Thank you for your patience. I went over time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Dr.
ma'am.
Kamala.
Very nice one.
Very nice,
Uh,
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Very much.
I still advise everyone to be on mute. Now it's time for question and answer session. If whoever has question, you can raise your hand. We can get one. We can get to you one by one, or you can type your questions in the chat. If you have questions, you can raise your hands. No questions. Okay. So we have Darshan Desai. You can ask.
Yeah, ma'am. A good understanding, ma'am, about the whole thing. The only thing is like I have been following Dr. Arlene Taylor, who is a brain function specialist. So the moment we use the word preference, don't think we free it from the style concept, because
That's
preferences will be there, and I may prefer something because like I have experienced, I myself am a parent educator since 22 years. I've done a lot of research on this, and the clarity which I got with Dr. Arlene Taylor's research, that there is something which the child is born innate, and over a period of time, it does get established of in terms of preferences. So that does not mean that other mode child cannot use, but the preferences are always there. Unfortunately, the education of the teachers is very less, is what I feel, because the whole how practical it would be, even if the teachers first of all are not aware something like this exists, and if they know in a diverse class, to use that, like at preschool level, there is a lot of mixture of all the modes of happening. But as we go ahead, like now with the pandemic, the visual mode came up. In the school, it is always auditory there. And the kinesthetic learners are somewhere who lag behind, or are unable to catch up with the mainstream. So
Yeah, so Darshan, I'm not familiar with the name you mentioned. The thing is, sorry, just one sec. I need to plug in my laptop. It's running out of charge. Just a second. Yeah. So the thing is, Darshan, I'm not able to go back from the position I made that these are not real. When you say innate, brain-based, there is no strong evidence for innate brain-based preferences. But we do develop preferences over time. That is very true. The thing is a preference necessarily best for the child in terms of learning? So I'll tell you, for example, we have children who don't like to read, or many children who say, I prefer to learn in the company of others, or I prefer to learn with music. I learn much better with music. Many students say this. Yes, they may be more motivated and more excited, and they may be happier in the presence of others and with music. But actually, is the learning quality better? In the sense, there is distraction when you're with your peers. There is distraction even in terms of music. because the brain switches. It's not able to simultaneously listen and work. So they may be happier with music and with their friends, but to say that they will learn better in terms of learning quality, that has no basis. Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. If we can get your number, I'll connect you with sending you some articles because
Sure.
she puts it very easily that out of the three channel, one channel each one of us have fastest, easiest, and quickest access to. So that will always be there. You just need to be aware. Like
Yeah.
I remember that I learn, my capacity when if I'm doing something, but my ears are more active. I have marked with lot of kids also because I've been running a preschool since last 13 years. So children who are like more of, I would use the word auditory, like
Yes.
leaving the school and going to the car, they tell like parrot everything that was there in the class, what was taught, what was not taught. And there are kids who are like totally, if the parents probes and pushes them or even shakes them, they are not ready to share anything. I have seen where parents get fumbled. This set of parents are very happy. But the parents, when the
Some
child,
of some of the things.
so that brain plasticity, people are not aware. If an
Yes.
auditory child shifts to a kinesthetic way or a visual, so
Yes.
there becomes issue. And then visual children, I'll give you example. A smallest change a mother does of bindi or a earring or something, they are the first one to notice. Which for a kinesthetic auditory will make no sense.
Yeah.
So
See, what you're talking about is, yes, some children are more observant than others. Some children's personalities, they are more talkative. Some of these are personality differences. So many types of differences are getting mapped onto this new thing, which is I'm sorry, I'm repeating, but it is really a myth. In the sense, it's a bit like we're talking about dwarves and elves, and no, there are human beings, they have different personalities, they have different strengths and weaknesses, and then they have certain conditioned habits. That is there. Yeah? I've always learned in this way, and that's what I prefer. And or I've these are definitely there. But anyway, you send me that, I'll be interested to read, to look at the evidence. Shall we
sure.
go to the next question, Ruth?
And the little confusion are learning style model and the multiple intelligence. There are two different models.
Totally different things. Totally different.
To distinguish between a visual learner and a visual spatial intelligence, or
Yes.
a auditory learner and a verbal linguistic, or a kinesthetic learner and a body kinesthetic intelligence.
Yeah.
How would you
That's a
distinguish
good
both?
question. So intelligences are really abilities. Okay. So we all have a profile in terms of how talented we are on these various intelligences. I'm putting it in quotes only because I like to call them intelligences, but it's our choice to call it that. Okay. These are talents, these are abilities, and we all have profiles. Learning styles are modes, like pathways to learning. It is not a strength. Like somebody who claims to prefer learning through visual may not be a very strong. I'm reinforcing the notion by answering your question. But I'm saying someone who prefers learning through visual. They are modes, supposed to be modes, supposed to be. The others are abilities. So it's good that you brought this up because it was one of the things I wanted to distinguish. Yeah. Definitely talents exist. There's plenty of evidence for that. That's not a myth.
Can we put it like input output? One is input and one is the using of the talents which you have.
Yeah, you could put it like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ma'am, we have more questions in the chat. So
Okay.
Chandrika want to thank you and ask that how effective has it been to use the varied modes of input for children with a specific mode of learning? That do we have specific examples?
Yeah, so as I said, it is not effective. That means children don't have specific modes of learning, and so it is not effective to to limit yourself to one mode. Is that what you're asking, Chandrika? Is that what you're asking? Matching teaching to particular children, saying this child will learn best this way, has not worked.
No,
In the
Kamala,
research,
that wasn't my question. I
sorry.
was wanting to know that, let's say we have, to use a strong word, if I may say, to use the word, labeled a child as being an auditory learner.
Yeah.
And then, as you give that example where about the reading and the listening part of it, and so my question was, do we have examples wherein we have given them exposure to visual, auditory, reading, and kinesthetic, and has it all the four helped in improving the learning of this particular child who we have labeled as an auditory learner? That was my question.
That's a nice question, and I like your use of the term label, because I think it's actually what it is. I've heard of schools where they literally put something on the shoulder, visual, auditory, like that. No, so I'm not aware of what you're saying, but in the general run of things, children are there who might have been labeled, but they go to a school where nobody's taking any notice of that, and therefore they get taught in all different ways. And they do, I mean, there's not been any, systematic study of this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Ma'am, we have another question from Ratna Sri. She asked, some teachers generally ask about teaching strategies or pedagogies, ways of handling specific so-called slow learners. So even after orientation about children having different learning styles, this perspective is visible. Can you suggest what can change this kind of perspective? Okay, are you saying, Ratna, that when a child has difficulty learning, seems to have, in spite of lot of one-on-one effort and so on, still seems to have some specific difficulties, you're saying that what are you saying, how the teacher approaches that child?
It's mostly a general notion, not a children having learning disabilities in that sense, but I'm talking about the general notion that is there around slow learners, or in the schools. This term is used a lot, even though we had some orientation. This is from my experience of our teacher training. So even though we had a session about children learning different styles, we have to take different teaching approaches when we are teaching a particular topic or concept. Still, this is a visible ask from the teachers that, we are so pressurized, we cannot handle slow learners, we are not able to motivate them. So in that perspective, I was asking, like, even though they have knowledge that children learn in different perspectives, still the slow learners are not part of those learners. So still we see a lot of bifurcation there.
Maybe I would ask, why is the child, I'd have to find out what is happening with the child who's being called a slow learner, right? It might actually just be a specific learning difficulty, or there may be some motivational issue, there may be some emotional issue at home. I really don't know. Each child will have but it is a reality that there's a range of abilities. I was showing that first diagram. There are so many things that can vary from one child to another. The background they come with, the language, they're familiar with, the kinds of the information, the books they have at home. There may be so many reasons why the lesson that I as a teacher deliver, it is received differently by different children. And it doesn't matter the mode that I deliver. Whatever I do, they're all going to take it differently. They're going to interpret it differently. They're going to get more or less out of it, right? So a child who's over a long period repeatedly not getting much, it may be the teacher's fault. It may be that she or he is not trying different things, not giving some one-on-one attention, because often it's an attention problem. Could be attention, could be memory, right? It may be the teacher's just not given, maybe doesn't have one-on-one time, I don't know. So you're asking what can change this mindset among teachers? I think, more workshops, more maybe, where a teacher who has a different perspective can come and talk to teachers. Talking to teachers is the best. if you just get an expert from some university and say, this is what it is, it has very limited impact. I find if teachers come and tell teachers, I had a student like this, and it's a story you're telling. This is the experience I had. This happened, and this is what helped. That really inspires. Maybe that's the way we have to go.
Thank you for answering. And I think you answered a little bit about knowing the children's background itself.
Yes.
Being connected to their background, to their parents. Yes. I think that also helps.
Yeah, absolutely. So much can be happening in their lives, And it's just this class is one small slice of their life.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ma'am, we have one more question from Shushma. She's asking, some children are very energetic but have very little interest in formal academic learning. There is a lack of sufficient retention. There is no family support to these children. How such children could be helped?
Yeah, it's a bit similar to the previous one. Each child has to be understood, their whole life and situation has to be understood, right? There is no general formula rule that you can put. I mean, such a child could be helped by a teacher who cares. I can put it like that. No, I mean, a teacher who cares will figure out what's wrong, what's happening, why are you not interested. Again, there are emotional issues. There could be prior experience with the teacher, which was very painful, and that's led to a block. Many blocks are emotional, or they could be genuine learning difficulty. So nowadays, there's more and more being understood about subtle learning difficulties, very subtle. So, like even in our school, we have a few children who have difficulty with holding a pencil and writing. Now, for so long, we didn't know this, and we would have said, oh, it's attitude, you're just lazy, you're not doing what, why are you being so difficult, all this. But actually, it was literally painful for them to write. In other cases, to formulate thoughts into sentences and write was very, very difficult. And this all has to do with information processing, differences in that. A greater understanding of that would be great. Otherwise, patience, the patience of an affectionate teacher. And, another thing, by the way, more and more exam boards are understanding that students need access arrangements for, accommodations for writing exams. And if you see, that's quite a large percentage, 10 to 15% of children in good schools and good boards that are doing this, 10 to 15% of kids require some kind of accommodation, and that improves their performance. That means there are definitely needs out there. No, there are specific needs.
Thank you, Kamala.
Sure.
Sushma, you can speak if you want to. Sushma?
No, she said thank you.
Okay,
said.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, your voice is not. Any more questions?
There's something here. Does the method of learning depend? Yes, I think the method of learning depends on the age for sure, because we use abstraction, symbolism, and writing at an older age. Yeah, to understand symbolism takes some time. Representations of representation. So reading and writing is the first kind of level of representation, and then it gets more complex further from that, right? So much more concrete materials at younger ages, and shorter lessons. Like if I can expect older children to listen to a lesson for an hour and a half, I can't expect that for younger children. They have shorter attention spans. And maybe a lot more has to be in play for younger children. So the method of learning has to include play. So yeah, definitely it depends on the age of the child. However, I would say that older children also enjoy playing and learning sometimes, and they can also definitely benefit from concrete approaches to learning. Like you can teach trigonometry out out on the road using sticks and tape measures. It doesn't have to be from a textbook. It really helps to use other modes, even for older children.
Saloni, if you have a question, you can ask now.
Yeah, am I audible? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So based on my understanding here, like how you shared the implications of the idea of learning styles it might have in a classroom, right?
Right.
So thinking along those lines, so how would a classroom kind of look like, keeping this perspective in our head, right? So I'm just wondering about this particular strategy that we often come across in the idea of inclusive education and universal design for learning, where we can increase student engagement or student interest in the classroom by providing them by giving them choices to choose how they represent their learning or choose the method in which they want to learn. So now, and the idea there is that if a child learns better in a particular mode, then they will go ahead and do that. So
that part.
Now, should choice be given or not given?
So
I'm
choice,
just wondering.
Yeah, see, now choice in how to present their learning is a motivational strategy. Okay, it is perfectly fine. It's nice because each child will choose something, but they may choose it somewhat randomly, and then they will be motivated and they'll feel that sense of autonomy. For that, it's valuable. As long as we're not thinking to ourselves that something in this child's brain is inevitably linked to that mode. As long as I don't think that, and I take the choice lightly, and I take it as a motivational strategy, that's fine. It's nice.
Right. So I don't know. I'm just wondering, when do you kind of draw that line, that till when is it a motivational strategy and not
well, according to me, it's never a mapping of your learning style, because that doesn't exist. What a child chooses is based on some idea, something that I am like this, I like that. It is not necessarily the best way for them to learn. There is nothing in the brain that is actually better at learning this way or that way, right? And except to say that if I teach in one way, and it's echoing somewhere. So, if I teach in one way, I teach something in one way, then I teach the same thing in a different way. I show a video or I have a model. It is good for all my learners. I'm using multiple modes, and that increases learning, that improves learning. So it is better to do that than to say, okay, you people who like visual, I'll do this for you. And you people who like verbal, I'll do that for you. Yeah. Then you're denying some children different modes of learning based on very flimsy foundation. There is no foundation for denying these children that mode and denying those children this mode. Yeah.
Right. So then so what you're saying, that the onus lies on the teacher to make sure that the teacher is not sending them to that particular mode, right?
Yes. But it lies on me. Yes, you're right.
Correct. So now I'm just saying that if I as a teacher have provided that autonomy to the kids, saying, okay, these are 4 different corners in the classroom, these are 4 different things that you can do, go ahead and do what you want to, right? So if I frequently provide these spaces, the same child might go to the same place because it is easier for them. So how do you motivate them to try other
such a good question, Saloni. Such a good question, because if I were a teacher in a classroom with 4 corners like that, I would force them to spend some time in each corner, because I really believe that's the way for their brain to fully develop all its faculties, all its intelligences. Yeah, exactly. Very nice question. I would make sure that there may be an afternoon when I say you do what you want, but I will make sure if someone's only going to one corner, I'll say you all should visit all the corners.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Any more questions? You can raise your hand. Oh yeah, Sonia. Sonia, you can ask.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah.
So taking up from where we left in the last question, this is in connection to my years of teaching in school, and when CC was suddenly introduced by CBHC in all the schools, teachers were in a complete mess. So I think the fundamental idea was here, like you were talking about the four corners, and he would say that, okay, you have to go to all the corners. So that's exactly what happened, like for one formative assessment, the teachers were had to carry out multiple modes of assessment, right? So anyway, yeah, so why it failed and why it had scrapped off is another story altogether. But I really liked the point that you brought up, that it's not so much about specific learning styles, and according to you, there's nothing called specific learning styles, but it is a background with which the child is entering the classroom. Okay, so I completely agree with that. And my concern here is that as a teacher, if we are considering a regular Indian classroom, usually the teacher-student ratio is something about 50 students and one teacher taking it. How much? If we have the intent, I think we can go a long way. But many a times it actually is a practical problem. It's not so much as a question as something that I'd like to point out, that it is sometimes, so difficult, even if we wish to bring in various ways of approaching one particular topic. For example, in my literature class, I'm taking up today something like in a grammar, I'm taking up writing down a paragraph. So, how many times can I revisit that particular topic and address it in various ways to suit the need of various learners? Or, like you are saying, everybody would be benefit from different approaches. But I'm just trying to point out here that, sometimes it actually does not really become feasible and we are unable to implement it, even though we understand it and we appreciate it. So I just wanted to bring that point of view across.
Your point is well made. I don't think I'm saying that every single topic has to be taught in all 6 ways. Not at all. To make sure that in fact, even as the teacher, it's more fun to have some variety, right? Certain topics you'll bring up in certain ways, certain topics in other ways. Just a mix and match approach. And one more thing that I thought the 4 corners were learning corners, not assessment corners. Yeah, it's crazy to have to assess a person in 4 different ways. That I meant that learning. I thought they were learning corners in that. So that was my misunderstanding.
Okay,
Ruth,
I get the point. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
yes, and CC. It was assessment. Like for
that's
different corners.
Amazing.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kamala.
Sure,
okay.
sure. Ruth, can we wind up in a bit?
Yes, ma'am. Darshan sir's hand is also up. Would you be open to taking one more question?
Sure, one more I can do. Sure.
Ma'am, what is the role of brain plasticity in this whole? Because the brain plasticity, neuroplasticity has been done a lot of research.
Yes.
So, connecting to learning style and, the way things have evolved today with the research, like a lot of research which was done previously is nullified with the research in last 10 years. So how does that have an impact?
So brain plasticity is very well documented. There is no question about it that our brains are truly plastic in the sense that we are learning machines and lifelong learning machines. And a lot of change can happen in our attitudes, in our knowledge base, Now, this doesn't have anything to do with learning styles, except, I suppose, to say that if I have grown up so far in life thinking that I have a particular way in which I learn best, if I try something else and I put in the effort and the energy, I will probably be able to learn that way too. That's where plasticity would work for me. That it is not that my brain is fixed and I can only do it this way, or this is the best for me. If I put in energy and effort and I use good materials, I could probably learn to learn in another mode as well. So learning to learn is a good way to think of plasticity. Yeah, thanks. Nice questions.
So we have come to the end of the session. Thank you for the insightful talk, Dr. Kamla. And thank you all of the students for participating and having a lovely discussion.
And your number you can share so we can connect.
Mine? My email ID is best.
Mobile number?
That is tough because I'm a teacher. So then in the middle of class. But email, I do check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, all of you. Very, very nice to be with you and really nice questions.